portrait was standing up against the back wall of my husband's storage unit, draped in a yellowed linen sheet as though someone had placed it there and waited for me to arrive. When I pulled the sheet away, I saw Daniel in a black tuxedo, younger by at least 20 years, smiling beside a woman I had never met. She wore a long ivory wedding dress and held a bouquet of white roses. Her hand rested lightly against his chest. His arm circled her waist, with the same familiar tenderness he had shown me in every photograph from our own wedding. At first, I thought I was looking at an old family friend. Then I saw the brass plate fixed to the bottom of the frame. Daniel and Evelyn Mercer, June 18, 1994. My husband had told me he had never been married before. He had told me his life began late, after years spent building his business and caring for his widowed mother. And yet, 20 feet inside a storage unit I had not known existed, there was a wedding portrait large enough to hang over a fireplace. Beneath it sat a locked steel box, 3 banker's cartons, and an envelope with my name written across the front. Not my married name, my full legal name from before I met him, Laura Ann Bennett. The handwriting was not Daniel's. I stood there holding the dusty sheet, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant rattle of a rolling metal door somewhere down the corridor. 3 questions came to me at once. Who was Evelyn Mercer? Why had Daniel hidden her from me for 16 years? And how had someone who knew my maiden name placed an envelope inside a unit that had remained locked since before my husband died? I did not know it yet, but the wedding portrait was not the secret. It was the warning. Good day, dear listeners. It's Nora again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Laura Bennett Mercer. I was 53 years old when my husband died, and I had spent most of my working life as a billing supervisor at a regional hospital outside Columbus, Ohio. People sometimes hear the word billing and imagine rows of numbers without emotion. But hospital billing is full of emotion. Every charge belongs to someone who was frightened, injured, grieving, recovering, or trying to understand why being sick had become so expensive. My work required patience. A number could be correct and still be in the wrong place. A signature could be genuine and still authorize the wrong thing. A system could appear balanced while hiding an error that affected someone's entire life. I learned never to panic when something did not add up. I learned to follow the record. Daniel used to tease me about that. You can't look at a grocery receipt without auditing it, he would say. I would tell him that numbers were simply people trying to tell the truth without using words. We lived in a modest brick house in Worthington, on a street lined with maples and narrow driveways. Daniel owned a small commercial property maintenance company. He handled repairs for office parks, medical buildings, and several local banks. He was not wealthy, at least not in any way I could see. He drove a 6-year-old pickup truck, wore work boots until the soles separated, and complained whenever the price of coffee went up. We had no children together. I had a daughter, Rachel, from my first marriage. She was 31 and lived in Cincinnati with her husband and their little boy. Daniel treated her kindly, though never with the effortless warmth of a father. He was respectful, dependable, and somewhat formal. That was Daniel's nature. He was not a man who filled a room. He stood at the edge of it and watched. When we met, I was 37 and newly divorced. He was 42. We were introduced by a woman from my church who said Daniel was quiet but decent. For 16 years, that description seemed accurate. Our marriage was not dramatic. We paid bills, took weekend trips, argued over the thermostat, and planted tomatoes every spring even though the squirrels ate more of them than we did. Daniel was careful with money. So was I. We kept a joint checking account for household expenses and separate retirement accounts through work. Daniel said the business needed its own banking structure, and because I understood how complicated business records could be, I did not interfere. Trust does not always look like blindness. Sometimes it looks like respect. That was what I believed I was giving him. Daniel died on a rainy Tuesday in October. He had driven to inspect a damaged roof at a medical office complex. One of his employees found him sitting in the cab of his truck, his head resting against the window. The doctors called it a sudden cardiac event. By the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing anyone could do. There are moments after a death when the world becomes strangely administrative. Someone asks for a date of birth. Someone else asks for a social security number. A nurse hands you a plastic bag containing a wallet, a ring, a belt, and keys. You are expected to answer questions while part of your mind is still waiting for the dead person to walk through the door. I did what I had always done. I made a list: funeral home, insurance, business employees, utilities, vehicle title, tax records. I kept the list on a yellow legal pad beside the kitchen phone. During the first week, Daniel's older cousin, Martin Mercer, stepped in to help with the business. Martin was an attorney who worked primarily in commercial real estate. He was polished, silver-haired, and always calm. He attended the funeral in a dark navy suit and stood near the front as though he had been assigned a role. Afterward, he placed both hands around mine. "Daniel trusted me with certain business matters," he said. "You shouldn't have to carry any of that right now." I thanked him. His voice was gentle. His expression was sympathetic. Nothing about him appeared threatening. That is important to understand. Dangerous people do not always arrive as enemies. Sometimes they arrive carrying folders. 3 days later, Martin came to the house with a leather briefcase and a stack of documents. He explained that Daniel's company was under financial strain. Several contracts had ended. Equipment loans remained outstanding. Payroll taxes might still be due. He recommended that I sign a temporary authorization, allowing him to communicate with banks, vendors, and employees. "I'll keep the problems away from your front door," he said. I read every page. The authorization was broader than he described. It would have allowed him to negotiate claims, transfer certain business assets, and communicate with financial institutions on behalf of Daniel's estate. "I'd like my own lawyer to review this," I said. Martin smiled. Of course, I would expect nothing less. But something changed in his eyes. It was not anger, it was adjustment. As though he had made one calculation and now needed to make another. That was the first warning sign. The second came from Daniel's bookkeeper. Her name was Melissa Hart. She had worked part-time from a small office behind the company warehouse. A week after the funeral, she called me from a number I did not recognize. Her voice was low. "Mrs. Mercer, has Mr. Mercer's cousin spoken to you about closing the company accounts? He mentioned financial problems." There was a pause. "Daniel told me those accounts were not to be closed without your written approval. Why would he tell you that?" Another pause. "I don't know." Before I could ask more, she said someone had entered the office and ended the call. I tried calling back. The number went directly to voicemail. The following morning, Martin informed me that Melissa had resigned. He said she had become overwhelmed by the confusion after Daniel's death. When I asked for her resignation letter, he told me there was no formal letter. "She simply left," he said. "People do that. People did. But records usually remained." The third warning sign came from our mailbox. Daniel received a notice from a bank in Indianapolis, thanking him for updating the mailing address on an account ending in 4419. I had never heard of the bank. The notice was dated 6 days before his death. I called the customer service number and explained that Daniel had passed away. The representative asked whether I was an authorized signer. I said I did not know. She placed me on hold. When she returned, her tone had changed. "You'll need to visit a branch with identification and a certified death certificate. Can you tell me whether this is a personal or business account?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss the account by telephone." The nearest branch was almost 2 hours away. I added it to my list. That afternoon, Martin called. He did not ask how I was sleeping or whether I needed help. He asked whether I had risked any unusual mail. The question was too specific. "What do you mean by unusual?" "Old vendor notices as promotional material. Things that may look important but aren't." I looked at the bank envelope on my kitchen table. "No," I said. It was the first lie I had told him. I did not feel proud of it. I felt awake. Over the next 2 weeks, I began reviewing Daniel's home office. The room smelled faintly of cedar and machine oil. His desk drawers contained invoices, insurance policies, truck registrations, and warranty manuals. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. Daniel kept receipts for light bulbs purchased 9 years earlier. Yet there were no tax returns for the company. No loan documents, no payroll reports, and no copies of commercial leases. The filing cabinet had labels, but half the folders were empty. It was like walking into a classroom after someone had erased the board. The absence was the message. At the back of the lowest drawer, I found a small plastic from a storage facility called Northfield Secure Storage. Unit 318. The card did not show a name, but a 4-digit access code was written on the back. I searched our joint bank's statements and found no payments to Northfield. Then I searched Daniel's personal credit card records. Nothing. The storage facility was 25 minutes north of the city, beyond a stretch of warehouses and auto repair shops. I called and gave them Daniel's name. The manager became cautious. I can't confirm whether someone is a tenant. I'm his wife. He has died. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'll need documentation. I asked what documentation. She gave me a list: death certificate, photo identification, proof of marriage, and letters from probate court showing my authority to act for the estate. Daniel's will had named me executor, but the probate appointment had not yet been issued. When I told Martin about the storage card, he answered too quickly. Daniel used storage units for equipment. Why was this card in his home desk instead of the company office? He probably forgot about it. Do you know what's inside? No. One word. Flat and immediate. I wrote the date and time of the call on my legal pad. I was not brave. I was careful. Probate court issued my appointment 11 days later. That same morning, I drove to Northfield Secure Storage with a folder containing every document the manager had requested. The facility sat behind a tall fence topped with loops of wire. The office had gray walls, a coffee machine, and a television showing a daytime court program with the sound turned off. The manager's name was Denise. She examined my paperwork, made copies, and typed Daniel's name into her computer. Her eyebrows moved slightly. Is there a problem? I asked. The account is current. How far in advance? She looked again. 18 months. Who made the payment? I can't see the funding source on this screen. Can you tell me when the unit was rented? March of 2009. That was almost a year before Daniel and I, married. Denise gave me a new lock and accompanied me through the gate. The units were arranged in long climate-controlled corridors. Unit 318 was near the back. The original lock had to be drilled. The sound echoed through the hallway like metal breaking inside a church. When the door rolled upward, cool, stale air moved across my face. The unit was not filled with maintenance equipment. It contained furniture, a narrow writing desk, 2 dining chairs wrapped in blankets, a small bookshelf, a cedar chest, and at the rear the covered portrait. I walked toward it slowly. Dust had gathered along the top of the frame, but not evenly. One corner was cleaner than the others, as though someone had touched it recently. I pulled away the linen sheet. Daniel and Evelyn Mercer smiled at me from another life. The bride was delicate-looking, with dark hair pinned beneath a veil. She appeared to be around 30. Her smile was restrained, almost uncertain. Daniel looked different, not merely younger, open. I had never seen that expression on his face. The brass plate confirmed the date, June 18, 1994. My legs weakened. I sat on one of the wrapped chairs and stared at the portrait. Grief is confusing when betrayal enters it. For weeks, I had been mourning the man I believed I knew. Now I was mourning the version of myself who had believed him. I wanted to cry instead. I looked around the unit. That was my profession speaking through me. When an account contains a serious error, emotion does not correct it. You identify the source. The steel box beneath the portrait was locked. The banker's cartons were sealed with brown packing tape. On top of the first carton lay the envelope bearing my maiden name, Laura Ann Bennett. My hands shook when I opened it. Inside was a single typed page. Laura, if you are reading this, Daniel is either dead or he has finally been forced to tell you the truth. Do not give the portrait, the boxes, or the steel case to Martin Mercer. Do not sign anything Martin gives you. Take everything to an attorney who does not know the Mercer family. Ask for the probate file of Evelyn Mercer, deceased March 3, 2001. Then ask why the beneficiary of the Evelyn Mercer Family Trust was declared dead in 2007. The letter was unsigned. At the bottom, someone had written one final sentence by hand. Daniel was afraid, but he was not innocent. I sat there for a long time. The facility's ventilation system clicked on above me. Somewhere beyond the walls, a truck reversed with a steady electronic beep. I read the letter again, then a third time. Evelyn had died 9 years before Daniel married me. That alone did not explain why he had lied about her. But the reference to a trust and a beneficiary declared dead changed the shape of the mystery. This was no longer only about a hidden marriage. It was about money, and possibly fraud. I called Denise and asked whether anyone besides Daniel had accessed the unit recently. She checked the electronic entry records. The gate code assigned to this unit was used 4 days ago. Daniel died 3 weeks ago. She looked at me. I'm aware. Can you tell me who entered? The system records the code, not the person. Do you have security footage for the gate and main corridors? It overwrites after 30 days. I asked her to preserve it. She hesitated. You may need a lawyer to request that. Then please note that I asked today. She wrote something on a form. I photographed the unit exactly as I had found it. The portrait, the boxes, the envelope, the lock, the dust patterns, the furniture. Then I called a locksmith to open the steel case. Inside were old bank statements, legal correspondence, a marriage certificate, a death certificate, property deeds, and a set of cassette tapes in clear plastic cases. The bank statements belonged to a trust with a balance that at one point exceeded $8 million. I stared at the number. It did not feel real. Money of that size belonged to corporations, hospitals, or people whose names appeared on buildings. Daniel and I had debated whether to replace our dishwasher, because the old one still worked if you pushed the door with your knee. Yet he had possessed records connected to millions. At the bottom of the case was a newspaper clipping. Local woman and daughter missing after river accident. The photograph showed Evelyn. Beside her stood a little girl of perhaps 6, with dark hair and serious eyes. The article said Evelyn Mercer and her daughter, Anna, had disappeared after their vehicle left a rural bridge during heavy rain in 2001. Evelyn's body was recovered downstream. The child was never found. 7 years later, Anna had been declared legally dead. The trust referenced in the letter had been created by Evelyn's father, a manufacturer named Robert Hale. Evelyn received income during her lifetime. After Evelyn's death, the principal was supposed to pass to Anna. If Anna died without descendants, the money would go to a charitable foundation. None of it was supposed to go to Daniel, but several trust statements showed transfers to companies I recognized, companies connected to Martin's real estate clients. I closed the case. Fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it sharpens the edges of every ordinary thing around you. The zipper of your handbag, the glow of your phone, the sound of footsteps in a hallway. I drove home with the documents locked in the trunk of my car, checking my rearview mirror more often than necessary. At home, I parked in the garage and remained behind the steering wheel. The kitchen window glowed above the sink. The porch light had come on automatically. Everything looked exactly as it had the day before. But I no longer believed that familiar things were necessarily safe. I carried the steel box inside and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I made coffee I did not drink. On a fresh page of my legal pad, I wrote 5 names: Daniel Mercer, Evelyn Mercer, Anna Mercer, Martin C. Mercer, Melissa Hart. Below them, I wrote, who benefits if Anna is dead? Who entered the storage unit 4 days ago? Who wrote the letter? I considered calling Rachel. I decided against it. Until I understood what I was dealing with, I did not want my daughter frightened or involved. I also did not call Martin. That decision may have saved the case. Instead, I searched for probate attorneys in Columbus who had no visible connection to Martin's firm. I found Rebecca Shaw, a former state assistant attorney general, who specialized in contested estates, trust litigation, and fiduciary misconduct. Her website was plain: no grand promises, no photographs of marble conference rooms. I called at 8 the next morning. Her assistant offered me an appointment the following week. I said, I have evidence that a child may have been falsely declared dead in order to redirect an $8 million trust. There was silence. Can you come at 11? Rebecca Shaw was 60, with close-cut gray hair and a habit of reading an entire page before asking a question. I brought copies, not originals. That was one of the first things she noticed. You've preserved the originals? In a bank safe deposit box opened this morning. Who knows about the box? Only me and the bank officer. She nodded. Good. For nearly 2 hours, she reviewed the letter, trust statements, probate documents, and storage records. When she finished, she placed both hands on the table. There are several possibilities, she said. Some are innocent. Most are not. Was Anna's death declaration legal? It may have been procedurally legal. That doesn't mean the evidence supporting it was truthful. Could Daniel have received the trust money? Not directly, based on this language. But he might have controlled entities that received loans, investments, or fraudulent transfers. Martin's clients appear in the statements. Yes. She tapped one of the pages. This transfer occurred 2 months after Anna was declared dead. Another followed 6 weeks later. The charitable foundation should have become the remainder beneficiary, but I see no distribution to it. What does that mean? It means either these records are incomplete or someone diverted the trust before the foundation could claim it. I asked the question I had been avoiding. Was Daniel part of it? Rebecca did not soften her answer. He kept the records hidden for 15 years. That suggests knowledge. Whether he participated, resisted, or tried to protect himself later is something we'll have to prove. We discussed immediate steps. Rebecca would obtain certified probate records for Evelyn and Anna, issue a preservation notice to the storage facility, and search for trust litigation or sealed proceedings. I would continue reviewing Daniel's personal records without contacting anyone. She also gave me a small digital recorder. Ohio allows one-party consent in many circumstances, she said. But speak to me before recording anything. In a setting where expectations of privacy may create complications, I don't expect Martin to confess. People rarely confess, they explain. Explanations are often more useful. Before I left, she asked whether Daniel had ever mentioned adoption, private schools, children's homes, or a town called Marietta. No. Why Marietta? The petition declaring Anna dead included an affidavit from a private investigator based there. The investigator's name was Charles Vane. He had sworn that he spent 18 months searching for Anna and found no evidence that she survived the accident. Rebecca looked at the unsigned letter again. Someone wants you to reopen this, she said. Who? That may be the most important question. That evening, Martin came to my house without calling. He stood on the porch, holding a paper bag from a bakery Daniel liked. I brought you some bread, he said. There are polite gestures that feel like kindness. There are others that feel like proof someone wants access to your kitchen. I left the storm door closed. That's thoughtful. He lifted the bag slightly. May I come in? I'm tired tonight. His smile remained. Of course. He looked past me into the hallway. Have you made any progress with Daniel's personal papers? Some. Anything unexpected? Mostly old receipts. He waited. I waited longer. Then he said, the storage facility called my office. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Why would they call you? I'm listed as counsel for the business. They received a document preservation notice from an attorney named Rebecca Shaw. The notice had been sent less than 3 hours earlier. Rebecca had not mentioned Martin, yet he already knew. I retained her to help with probate, I said. Laura, Rebecca has a reputation for turning family misunderstandings into litigation. I haven't discussed any family misunderstandings. His expression did not change, but the bakery bag tightened in his hand. Daniel had old materials that could be misinterpreted. His first marriage was painful. He did not speak of it because the child's death destroyed him. You knew about Evelyn, of course, and Anna. Yes. Why did no one tell me? That was Daniel's decision. He spoke gently, as though explaining a medical diagnosis to someone fragile. There are documents from that period that may create confusion, failed investments, disputes over estate administration. Nothing criminal, but potentially embarrassing to people who are still alive. Which people? Laura, grief can make old papers feel more significant than they are. That was when I understood. He did not know exactly what I had found. He was trying to measure it through my reaction. I kept my voice level. I'll let my attorney decide what matters. Martin's smile disappeared for less than a second, then it returned. Be careful whom you trust. Lawyers are paid by conflict. So are some family members. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. He studied me. Then he placed the bread on the porch floor. Daniel wanted you protected. From whom? He turned and walked to his car. I locked the door. The next morning, Rebecca obtained an emergency order preserving the storage footage. The video showed a dark sedan entering the gate 4 days before I opened the unit. A man wearing a baseball cap used Daniel's code. He remained inside for 37 minutes. The hallway camera captured only part of his face. It was not Martin. It was Daniel's former bookkeeper, Melissa Hart. Rebecca found her through a forwarding address. Melissa agreed to meet us at a diner in Delaware, Ohio, under one condition: no police. Not yet. She arrived carrying a canvas tote bag and looked as though she had not slept in weeks. I wrote the letter, she said before sitting down. I stared at her. How did you know my maiden name? Daniel kept a copy of your marriage license in a private company file. Why were you in the unit? To put the letter there and make sure the records were still intact. You had the access code? Daniel gave it to me last year. Why? Melissa wrapped both hands around a water glass because he thought Martin might kill him. Rebecca's expression remained still. Did Daniel use those exact words? Say, if something happens to me, do not assume it was natural. Daniel's death certificate listed a cardiac event. No autopsy had been performed because his medical history included high blood pressure. A coldness moved through me. Did you tell the police? I had no proof. What proof do you have now? Rebecca asked. Melissa opened the tote bag and removed a portable hard drive. For 9 years, I kept the internal books for Mercer Property Services. The company was real, but it was also used to move money. Martin created vendor companies. Daniel approved payments. Some vendors did work. Others existed only on paper. Where did the money come from? I asked. The Evelyn Mercer Family Trust. Melissa explained that after Anna was declared dead, Martin became legal counsel to the successor trustee, a private fiduciary named Harold Keene. Keene approved a series of loans from the trust to real estate partnerships. Those partnerships hired Daniel's company for inflated maintenance contracts. Money moved through several layers and returned to entities controlled by Martin and Keene. What did Daniel receive? Rebecca asked. Enough to keep his company alive, not millions. Maybe 300,000 over several years. My stomach tightened. $300,000. We had refinanced our house to pay off a business loan. Daniel had watched me sign those papers knowing his company had another source of money. He was part of it, I said. Melissa looked down. Yes, the truth has a weight of its own. Once spoken, it changes the air in the room. Why did he keep the evidence? I asked. Because Martin kept demanding more. Daniel wanted out. He began copying records in case he needed leverage. Why didn't he go to authorities? He was afraid of prison. And he believed Martin could prove Daniel designed the entire scheme. Did he? I don't know who designed it. But Martin controlled the lawyers, the trustee, and the partnerships. Rebecca connected the hard drive to an isolated laptop. The folders contained spreadsheets, scanned invoices, bank transfers, and emails. Several messages were from addresses associated with Martin's firm. One email included a sentence that stayed with me. The Bennett woman has no knowledge of the prior family structure and should remain outside all estate discussions. The Bennett woman, that was me. A line item, a risk to be managed. I asked Melissa why she had waited until Daniel died. She began crying quietly. Because I was a coward. Rebecca passed her a napkin. No, I said. You were afraid. There's a difference? Yes, I thought of all the years I had mistaken Daniel's silence for privacy. Cowardice protects comfort. Fear protects survival. Melissa looked at me for a long moment. Then, she told us the part that changed everything. Anna Mercer might still be alive. In 2018, Daniel received a letter from a woman named Anna Hale. She said she had been raised in Kentucky by a couple who changed her name after taking her from a temporary foster placement. She had recently obtained her original birth records and believed she Evelyn's daughter. Daniel showed the letter to Martin. Martin told him it was a scam. Where is the letter? Rebecca asked. Daniel kept it in the cedar chest. We returned to the storage unit that afternoon. Inside the chest were children's clothes, a stuffed rabbit, school photographs, and bundles of correspondence tied with ribbon. Near the bottom, we found the letter. Anna Hale described waking in a hospital after the river accident. She remembered being told her mother was dead. She remembered a woman named Mrs. Vane taking her to a foster home. Vane, the same surname as Charles Vane, the investigator who later swore he found no evidence Anna survived. Anna included copies of a birth certificate and a childhood medical record. She asked Daniel to meet her. There was no reply among the papers. But inside another envelope, I found a printout of a bank transfer for $25,000 to Anna Hale. The notation read, "Confidential settlement." A second document was a non-disclosure agreement prepared by Martin's firm. Anna had been paid to remain silent, but why would she accept $25,000 if she had a legal claim to millions? Rebecca found the answer 2 days later. Anna Hale had died in 2020 from complications following surgery. Her obituary said she left behind a daughter named Sophie. The trust language stated that Anna's interest passed to her descendants. That meant the rightful beneficiary was not dead. She was 22 years old and living in Lexington, Kentucky. Martin called me that evening. His voice remained courteous. "I understand Rebecca has contacted several financial institutions. She's doing her job. This is becoming expensive for everyone. Truth often costs more after people hide it." He exhaled slowly. Daniel participated willingly. "You should understand that before you let Rebecca turn him into a victim." "I don't think he was a victim." That answer seemed to unsettle him. "Then what exactly are you trying to accomplish?" "I'm trying to find out who stole from a child." "You have no idea how complicated this is." "No, but records are patient." He was silent. I continued. "They wait." The next week, Rebecca filed a petition in probate court seeking an accounting of the Evelyn Mercer Family Trust, suspension of the successor trustee, and protection of remaining assets. She also filed a civil complaint alleging fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, and civil conspiracy. Martin's firm responded within hours. They denied wrongdoing. They claimed the documents in the storage unit were incomplete, improperly obtained, and possibly fabricated by Melissa. Then they offered me money, $750,000, in exchange for returning all documents, dismissing the petition, and signing a confidentiality agreement. The offer arrived through another attorney so Martin could pretend it had not come from him. I read it at Rebecca's conference table. "That's more money than I've ever seen," I said. "Yes. If I accepted, could they still go after Sophie's claim? Yeah. Could they destroy the remaining records? Possibly." I pushed the offer back across the table. "Then it isn't my money." Rebecca nodded once. "I expected you to say that." Martin's next strategy was reputation. Anonymous letters were sent to Daniel's former employees claiming I planned to sue the company and seize their retirement funds. A local business journal received a tip suggesting I had manipulated my grieving husband before his death. Rachel called me after a stranger contacted her on social media. "Mom, what is happening?" I told her enough to keep her safe, but not every detail. She drove up that weekend. We sat at the kitchen table while my grandson slept upstairs. "I always thought Daniel was distant," she said. "I didn't think he was dishonest." "Neither did I." "Are you angry?" "Yes, you don't sound angry." I looked at the legal pad covered with dates, names, account numbers, and arrows. "Anger is not always noise." The pressure continued. Someone attempted to access my email account. A black SUV appeared twice near my office. Martin filed a motion asking the court to remove me as executor, arguing that grief had impaired my judgment. That motion failed. Rebecca obtained subpoenas for bank records. The records showed that more than $6 million had moved out of the trust through loans, consulting fees, property acquisitions, and maintenance contracts. Some money had funded legitimate projects. Much of it had not. Harold Keene, the trustee, resigned and invoked his right against self-incrimination during an initial interview. Then federal investigators became involved. The case moved from a family secret to a financial fraud investigation. Daniel's role became clearer. He had signed false invoices. He had certified work that was never performed. He had allowed his company to serve as a channel for stolen funds. But during the final 18 months of his life, he had copied files, recorded conversations, and attempted to establish direct contact with Anna's daughter, Sophie. The cassette tapes in the steel box contained meetings with Martin. On one recording, Daniel said, "The girl survived. Everything after that is theft." Martin replied, "Everything after that is settled law." Daniel said, "You paid her because you knew." Martin answered, We paid an unstable woman to stop harassing the family. Then Daniel asked, and her daughter? There was a long silence. Martin said, "Do not create another beneficiary." That sentence became the center of the case, not because it was dramatic, because it revealed knowledge. Martin knew Anna had a daughter. He knew the trust might pass to her, and he continued directing transfers afterward. The point of no return came when forensic accountants traced a payment from the trust to a consulting company owned by Charles Vane, the private investigator. The payment was made 11 days before Vane signed the affidavit stating Anna could not be found. He had been paid from the estate whose beneficiary he was supposedly searching for. Rebecca requested an expedited deposition. Martin came to my house one final time before it took place. It was late November. The trees were bare, and cold rain tapped against the porch roof. This time, I opened the door but did not invite him in. He looked tired, not frightened. People like Martin do not show fear easily. They show irritation at losing control. "You're destroying Daniel's name," he said. "Daniel damaged his own name. He tried to protect you. He kept me uninformed so I could not testify against him. That may also have protected you. Protection without consent is another form of control." He glanced toward the street. "You think Sophie will thank you? She'll be consumed by lawyers, taxes, publicity, and people asking for money. That will be her choice. She's a child. She's 22. Exactly. I watched him. What do you want, Martin? A private resolution. You already offered one. This would be larger. How large? 2 million? To you. A structured settlement for Sophie. No criminal referrals." I almost laughed, but nothing about the moment was funny. "You're offering stolen money to purchase silence about stolen money. I'm offering stability." "No, you're offering a cleaner ending for yourself." His face hardened. For the first time, the polite surface cracked. "You have benefited from Daniel's choices for 16 years. We lived in a 3-bedroom house with a leaking basement. Your mortgage was paid. Your retirement is secure. Don't pretend moral purity." "I'm not pure," I spoke quietly. "I'm responsible for what I do after I learn the truth." He took one step closer. "Think carefully. When this is over, Daniel will be remembered as a criminal. He was part of a crime, and you can live with that?" I thought of the wedding portrait, the hidden boxes, the envelope bearing the name I had before Daniel. "I have to." Martin looked at me as though he finally understood that shame would not control me. I closed the door. His deposition lasted 2 days. The first morning, he arrived wearing a charcoal suit and carrying no visible papers. His attorney objected frequently and instructed him not to answer questions involving client privilege. Rebecca proceeded slowly. She established his relationship to Daniel, his representation of the trust, his work with Harold Keene, his involvement with the petition declaring Anna dead. Martin said he had relied on the investigators' sworn findings. Rebecca placed the payment record in front of him. "Were you aware that Mr. Vane received funds originating from the trust before submitting his affidavit?" "I don't recall." "Did you authorize the payment?" "I would need to see the complete file." She showed him the authorization bearing his electronic signature. He studied it. "I handled hundreds of transactions." "Did you handle hundreds of transactions involving the legal death of your cousin's child?" His attorney objected. Martin's composure remained intact, but his answers grew narrower. On the second day, Rebecca played the recording. "Do not create another beneficiary." Martin's attorney demanded the deposition stop. Rebecca asked one final question. "When you instructed Daniel not to create another beneficiary, were you referring to Sophie Hale?" Martin said the recording lacked context. Rebecca repeated the question. He said he did not remember Sophie's surname. Rebecca placed an email on the table. It had been sent from Martin to Harold Keene 3 days after the recorded conversation. Subject: Hailed descendant exposure. The email discussed options for delaying, contesting, or limiting the C's claim. Martin read it. For the first time since I had known him, he appeared uncertain, not emotional, not broken, simply unable to locate the next safe answer. He invoked his right against self-incrimination. The room became very quiet. That was the moment his story collapsed. There was no shouting, no confession, just a man in an expensive suit staring at a document he could not explain. Federal charges followed 6 months later. Martin, Harold Keene, and Charles Vane were indicted on fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, obstruction, and related offenses. Melissa received limited immunity in exchange for cooperation. She admitted helping prepare false invoices, but provided records that allowed investigators to reconstruct more than a decade of transactions. Daniel was named as a participant in the civil findings, though he could not be prosecuted. That part hurt more than I expected. There was no legal ruling that could divide him neatly into guilty and innocent. He had helped steal money. He had later tried to preserve the truth. Both things were real. The court removed the old trustee and appointed an independent corporate fiduciary. Assets were frozen. Properties purchased with diverted funds were sold. Insurance policies and professional liability coverage paid part of the losses. Not all the money was recovered. Money rarely returns as cleanly as it disappears. But after taxes, legal expenses, and settlements, Sophie received a trust valued at a little over $5 million. I received nothing from Evelyn's trust. I had never asked for anything. Daniel's company was liquidated. After legitimate debts were paid, the remaining value passed to me under his will. It was far less than Martin had offered for my silence. I was glad. There are amounts of money that make life easier. There are other amounts that make sleep impossible. Martin eventually pleaded guilty to several counts in exchange for dismissal of others. He lost his law license and received a federal prison sentence. Harold Keene also pleaded guilty. Charles Vane died before trial. The court records confirmed that his wife had transported Anna from the hospital after the accident using falsified foster care documents. The Vanes later arranged for Anna to be placed with relatives in Kentucky under a different surname. No one could fully explain why. Perhaps they were paid. Perhaps they believed they were helping Daniel avoid a custody dispute. Perhaps the truth was uglier. Some questions remain unanswered, because the people who know the answers take them into silence. Sophie came to meet me the following spring. She resembled Evelyn. I knew before she introduced herself. She had the same serious eyes from the newspaper photograph, though there was warmth in them too. We met at Rebecca's office because neither of us knew what kind of meeting it would be. Sophie carried a small envelope. "My mother kept this," she said. Inside was a photograph of Daniel taken in 2019. He was sitting across from Anna in a restaurant. On the back, Anna had written, "He said he was sorry, but he was still afraid." I held the photograph for a long time. "Did your mother forgive him?" I asked. Sophie considered the question. She wanted to. I don't know if she did. That sounds honest. She didn't spend the settlement money. She thought accepting it had been a mistake. She was pressured. She still blamed herself. I understood that kind of blame. It is the burden careful women often carry when other people deceive them. We believe we should have noticed earlier, asked better questions, read the room more accurately. But deception is not proof of foolishness. It is proof that someone chose to misuse trust. Sophie and I did not become family overnight. Real healing is slower than that. We exchanged letters, then phone calls. She asked about Daniel as a person, not only as a participant in the fraud. I told her he loved black coffee, hated flying, and sang badly when he thought no one could hear him. I told her he could repair almost anything except the truth. A year after the case ended, I sold the house in Worthington. Not because I hated it, because every room had become a question. I bought a smaller cottage near Yellow Springs, with pale green shutters and a narrow garden behind the kitchen. I continued working at the hospital for another 2 years, then reduced my hours and began volunteering with a legal aid organization that helped widows understand estate documents. I did not give legal advice. I helped them make lists, account numbers, contact names, dates, questions to ask before signing. Sometimes freedom begins with a blank page and a working pen. Sophie used part of the trust to finish graduate school. She also created a small foundation in her mother's name supporting children separated from family during emergencies. She did not buy a mansion. She rented a bright apartment with large windows and adopted an elderly dog. That choice told me more about her than any court record could. Melissa moved to another state and began working for a nonprofit. We exchanged Christmas cards. She never stopped regretting what she had done, but regret became different once she began using it to tell the truth. I kept the wedding portrait. For a long time, it remained wrapped in the same linen sheet. Then one autumn afternoon, Sophie visited my cottage. We carried it into the garden and removed the cover. Daniel and Evelyn smiled beneath the changing leaves. Sophie touched the edge of the frame. "You can throw it away," she said. "No," I told her. "It belongs to you." She shook her head. "It belongs to the story." So we donated it, along with copies of the legal records, to a local historical archive connected to Evelyn's family business, not as a monument to wealth, as evidence of what can happen when families treat silence as inheritance. People sometimes ask whether I still love Daniel. The answer is not simple. Love does not always disappear when truth arrives. Sometimes it changes category. It becomes grief for the person who existed, and grief for the person you imagined. I do not excuse him. I do not hate him. I no longer carry the responsibility of making him better than he was. That is its own kind of peace. On quiet mornings, I sit behind my cottage with coffee and watch birds move through the garden. The porch boards creak. The dog next door barks at delivery trucks. My life is smaller than the mystery that interrupted it, and that is exactly how I want it. I did not become rich. I became free. I did not defeat Martin by being louder than he was. I survived him by keeping copies, by asking questions, by refusing to sign what I did not understand, by remembering that calm is not weakness and patience is not surrender. The most dangerous lies are often not the ones shouted at us. They are the ones arranged carefully inside ordinary life. A missing file, an unexplained account, a question answered too quickly, a portrait hidden behind a sheet. If something in your life does not add up, do not ignore it simply because the person explaining it sounds confident. Follow the record. The truth has a weight of its own. And when you finally stop carrying someone else's secrets, you may discover that justice is not the loud moment when a villain falls. Sometimes justice is a quiet house, a locked door, a garden you chose for yourself, and the ability to hear your own thoughts without anyone telling you what they should mean. What would you have done if you had opened that storage unit and found the portrait waiting for you? Would you have confronted your family immediately, accepted the settlement, or followed the evidence no matter where it led? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need the reminder that trust should be given with love, but signatures should always be given with care.